Community Police Commission Rules Committee meetings Wednesday, September 6th. And we are live streaming from our Perkins Avenue building. And thank you for joining us in person and online. So I will do a call to order right now. Commissioner Van Leer.
Present.
Commissioner Benito.
Present.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Present.
Commissioner Zayed.
Present.
And we are all present and we have a quorum. Thank you so much. So during this meeting, just for the public's knowledge, we're just doing kind of, typically we would have a review of our rules after 1 year. But I felt that during these 8 months that we've lived through these rules, that there are places that we could refine them a little bit. So during this session, I would just hope, and I've asked my committee to just look through the rules again and find whatever ways that we can improve them. And this, I'm going to treat this kind of as a brainstorming session. And my goal is that we will assign the rules for redrafting and come back on the 21st in our second meeting for this month to pass those drafts and hopefully get them passed on the 27th in our main commission meeting. So does that sound okay with everyone? Commissioner Van Leer?
Yeah, sure. I would, in terms of the agenda, like there's one new business thing, I think at least one new business thing. I would love for this committee to set a regular schedule, so we're not doing last minute meetings. So that would be my suggestion for a new business item.
Okay. Yeah, so these meetings were adjusted, so I know that everybody doesn't have to be here, but we try to include everybody. So I understand what you're saying, Commissioner Van Leer. So we will set a meeting. If you want to do that now, but I will be out of the country for a few months, so I'm not planning to have a meeting. That's what I'm hoping. That's what the rush is a little bit about, is to get us some rules that will stabilize us for the coming months. Is there like a day that we agree on? So my concern sometimes with scheduling it is I understand people want to go places, and having a meeting like right in the middle of the week is not very conducive sometimes. But we need to give time for the rest of the commission to read the rules that we. So I think that might determine it. So right now, Jason, do you know which ones are set already? And again,
what are set?
which committee meetings are set?
I know that Sarah's working with the chairs to commit to regular monthly meetings, but although this is a standing committee, you may not have business every month. So you can decide, if you want to set quarterly meetings or and then go from there, or if you want to do monthlies, that's up to you too. But
Do you want to do maybe every other month right now? We do
flexible. What do other people think?
I mean, for now, since we're going to be here, that might work.
Why don't we set the meeting, for after I come back, and then to go every other month. We will do the evidentiary hearing kind of rules at that point, so we may need to meet more intensely.
So yeah, I guess my suggestion would be that we meet monthly and we can cancel meetings rather than having to readjust and reschedule. So I would suggest we do monthly meetings on the night that there are no other committee meetings, and just keep it that way, and then we can cancel.
Okay. It's just that we run out of weeknights sometimes. There's a lot of committees. Yeah. So what day?
Correct.
So we'll have to figure out. I think that third week or the week before the committee meeting, the commission meeting is a little full, so we'll have to meet earlier. So what day so that would be the first week of the month. Usually, what days are good or bad?
I cannot do Thursday on the first week of the first Thursday. I always have a stand.
Okay, so then it is Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday.
We're starting in November then.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer Wednesday.
So Wednesday the 1st, is that the first one? And then it will be, you want to do the first Wednesday, right? So then December the 6th. January the 3rd might be a problem for me, but we can, yeah.
Probably a problem for one.
Well, November the 1st, it's kind of a problem for me. This is like a major college deadline, but, we can work around it. So should we set it for November the 1st? The only, actually, it's, our meetings are the third Wednesday?
The third, or is it the last?
Yeah, 'cause sometimes they're like 5
fourth
Wednesdays.
Wednesday.
Fourth
The fourth
Wednesday.
Wednesday, so then we can do the second Wednesday though,
Well,
too.
the second Wednesday
That's
Yeah.
all.
is
Training.
training.
Second Thursday, Tuesday?
Second Tuesday is open.
No, the 7th of November.
7th of November, did you want to set that and then
So
it'll
it's a
be
Tuesday instead of a Wednesday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday, yeah, 7th of,
Okay.
November, and then 12th of December, right? Second,
Monday, that's right.
third,
What's that?
12th of December. Yes,
I'm gonna be on, might be on vacation.
okay, we're just gonna have to, we,
Because I won't be on the 7th, but I mean, we can still.
You won't be,
as long as
okay.
we have a quorum, it's fine.
so. I mean, we could do it the first if it's just tight, I think I have a deadline. It's either first or the 7th, or the Monday, will you be there on the Monday, the 6th?
I am out that week. My wedding anniversary is the 5th, so.
Oh.
Oh, nice.
How many years?
7.
Oh. So he said it
Well, not quick.
So should we set it for the, it seems like more people will make it first. I just don't know, given the deadline for my students, I don't know if I will be done that day. It's just,
And next we do it the next week, several people are out.
yeah. And I'm pretty sure, actually, wait, actually no, I might not even be back yet. I can participate, like the committee meetings, I think should be fine. So I might not be back yet, actually. So,
So the
should we,
First Wednesday of the month.
Our next meeting is the 21st, right?
for this,
So-
yeah,
At that point, what if we just say, we'll figure out from there?
Can we
I
put this as tentative and then
Yeah.
we'll?
Yeah,
I think he wanted to have something in his calendar, especially when the holidays are coming, right?
because we know that we're not meeting in October, right?
Right, and we don't need to meet unless there's some emergency until we do the evidentiary hearing. So this is the difficulty of this committee, but it seems like there are things that are happening on a continuing basis that we need to meet. So what do we think?
Okay.
That's good, we can readjust, we can adjust.
So let's just take the first Wednesday?
First Wednesday.
Okay, all right. One thing done. Okay, great.
I have another agenda item I wanted to add. I wanted to make a motion for a vote on the rule that I sent everybody.
Okay, I haven't, did you add a footnote to it? And I want to figure out how I'm very, very concerned that this is setting a precedent. So this is a rule about the attendance. And I'm just concerned, I was not planning to pass the rules today. I was gonna pass the rules on the 21st.
I think if we bought, my feeling is we're gonna have a lot of other rules on the 21st. So if we already know, like this has been done out for a month, and I think we can add.
Did
if
you add
want
the
us to
footnote
adjust
though?
Language.
Did you add the footnote?
No, I mean, I think you can suggest the language for that.
I feel like we need to move on to the other rules. If you want to add the footnote, I think it's pretty clear, and then we can revisit it on the 21st. I'm not.
I think I'm making a motion for it.
Okay, there's a motion to pass that rule. I've not looked at it and it has not been revised according to my suggestion. So did everybody else, does anybody want to second it?
I'll second it.
We have a copy.
We don't have a copy of the rule.
I can read it.
It's probably.
It was sent to
Report, and then you'll be a copy and I can pass it out right now.
Yeah, I understand you're making a motion, but Commissioner Benito, it doesn't have the footnote. It's a very important rule, and I don't know how many I don't know if I want to spend time right now discussing it because we have to assign the other rules
This
that
is
are
how a
also.
motion works, though. If it's been seconded, we can talk about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's how
Right,
things work.
but, okay. Do you want to take a vote?
Whatever your discussion.
This is discussion, yeah.
Yeah. So honestly, I haven't like reviewed everything surrounding the rule and got the clarification on a few things that I wanted to get. So I just don't feel comfortable moving forward with it at this moment. I apologize for that.
Could you read it?
Sure, I can read it.
Can we put it, I mean, okay. It's again, it's still, it's not a complete rule yet, so that's
Well,
why.
I mean, you made a suggestion that we would talk about that suggestion here. I mean, and all you suggested was adding a footnote that says that it would not be retroactively applied. So I
Well,
don't see why there couldn't be
mhm.
you couldn't make a motion to amend that, or we could even talk about that.
Yeah, again, this is not what I had set on the agenda because there's so many rules to go through.
Right, but if you're saying there's so many rules to go through, and on the 21st, we're talking about revising the entire handbook, my feeling is if this was sent out over a month ago, and we had a discussion about it last meeting, I don't understand why we wouldn't talk about it.
We can talk about it, but I also know I made a suggestion. I think it's reasonable. We don't.
Right, and we can talk about it and we could add it.
The reason is we don't have an enforcement for that. And Commissioner Benito, I've sent out an email a month ago, have not responded from the co-chairs. We have a commissioner that's in violation of this rule. And I do not feel comfortable changing a rule when we don't have any further action on it, because there seems to be no enforcement of any of these rules. It's very much a shame. It brings us lack of legitimacy from the community. And we have to hold ourselves accountable. As I told you, even if it was a commissioner that, that I like, Commissioner Zayed, I would be enforcing the rule again. So this is the issue, as I don't see, it's not about the footnote, it's about there is no enforcement. And I understand, politically, I understand what's happening here. It's that we're going to revise the rule and then we're going to pretend no violations happened at all. Because you've not explained to me what the violations.
Can I just?
Yeah.
So let's start from scratch. I need clarification for the minutes. Is the motion on the floor to add the discussion to the agenda, or is the motion on the floor right now to pass the rule?
I was asking to add it, and then she said, no, sorry, I said I make a motion to pass it then.
Because you can do
To
a
add
motion
the
to add it to the agenda to be discussed tonight is an appropriate motion if that's what you want to do. Because I think we started with, is there any additions to the agenda?
Right.
And then it
Okay,
was,
I thought
so
this
we
was
can,
passing
so
the
if
motion,
for clarification, is the motion to add the discussion to the agenda, which would be a valid
I'm fine with
motion?
either.
So it's not passing the actual rule tonight, it's just adding the discussion to the agenda.
I mean, I would probably during the discussion, because this has been sitting, we've had this, and all you're saying is you just want a small footnote that
No,
says.
it's not what I'm just saying.
That-
Well, the footnote is not.
You could, during the discussion, if someone makes a motion, that's when it's valid. So you can't stop a motion during a discussion if someone wants to make a motion, right? So that is part of it. But the question on the floor that we need clarification on is the question on the floor to add this to old business as an item. The 1.771 chronic absenteeism.
That would be how it would work. I mean, we're just talking about the agenda
Yeah.
right now. So.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I make a
I
motion to
also-
add that to the agenda.
I would like a little clarification as to why we are rushing with this rule, which is very important. And there are other rules that are very important too.
I'm confused why it seems like rushing, because we had a conversation in our last meeting, and then I sent out a revised text, and I included a letter template that could be sent to the mayor. I sent it to everybody for feedback. I sent an additional email requesting, reminding people that this was sent for feedback. So to me, this doesn't feel like rushing this any more than any project we've done with any other rule.
Well, the footnote, again, it's not just the footnote. What I'm saying by the footnote is my concern that we don't have an enforcement for previous violations of any of these rules. And when we change the rules, and I've sent an email to the co-chairs over a month ago about this rule being in violation, and it's not something that we can do. The rules say right now that the co-chairs have to write this letter that you very kindly wrote for us to the mayor. That has not been done. So I'm a little bit
Point of
concerned.
order here, I feel like the motion is to put this on the agenda, not to discuss. So do we need to vote on whether we're putting this on the agenda?
Okay,
or
and what to put the discussion of this?
Yeah, on the agenda.
But, or do you want to vote these additions to this rule in? or
Because
do
we're
you
not
just
voting
want
on
to
any rules
discuss?
today.
We might, depending on if someone makes the motion during the discussion, but all I'm motioning for right now
It's
is
just
to
a
add it,
discussion.
to discuss it.
Okay.
But do you intend to make a motion to vote on the rule? I think that is probably reasonable to show, to tell us.
Maybe, depending on how the conversation goes.
Okay, so you can call the, are we done with discussion? Mr. Donaldson, do you have any concerns?
I was just gonna ask for an update from the co-chairs, but we can
Okay.
wait until we get
Yeah, we have to.
to it. It's fine.
Thank you.
All right, so let's call the vote. Commissioner Van Leer,
Aye.
Commissioner Benito,
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson,
Aye.
Commissioner Zayed,
Aye.
and I'll vote aye. Okay, motion passes. I would not, can we put this towards the end though? Is that okay? Because if we put this at the beginning, then we're not doing anything that we have planned on the agenda. You want this to be the first item that we deal with?
Why don't we just do things in order? This is 1.7.
Okay, sure, great.
So, in order.
Great advice. Okay. All right. So let us go through the rules. It's already 6:24. Let's just go through them bit by bit. I know I signed half to various commissioners. All right. Let's go with 1.1, which is basically the charter. So I don't see anything there unless anybody.
We can't change.
We can't change that, right? So we're going to move on from that. Is there is there anything missing from the charter?
I think the only thing we could do here is if we wanted to add some language around the charter, we obviously can't change what's in the charter. If there's some context we feel like we need to set, probably. But it seems pretty clear. This is just the charter language, so.
All right. Jason, is there anything that's missing from the charter? What is? You just took
To
basically.
the chair, no, the charter is copied directly in there, and it states that this is the charter, so,
All right.
I would caution against adding to the charter language and keep the integrity of it the way it is. So it's just a reference point in there, so people don't have to go look it up. To have it in your bylaws is prudent.
How about this? Is there any reason we didn't include the entire charter in 1.1?
The entire city charter,
No, for 150.
that is
Yeah.
that is the commission section. We don't, this is bylaws regarding our duties, not the duties of CPRB or any of those other things. That's a point of reference that would be external, because where do you stop? There's a lot of things we
I'm
can
not
reference.
asking for that. I'm asking for, this doesn't include our entire section though. right.
Oh, yes, it does. Of
Has the-
115.5, let's see.
No, because it doesn't have the rationale for it.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I apologize. This section includes the duties. So that's what the duties and authority of the commission, it takes that part of it, yes. So that you're right, it doesn't have the preface to it, but this is your specific duties and authorities, which your rules are bound around. in
Commissioner
there.
Benito?
So,
I would not recommend putting the entire charter in here. I think it's referenced, and I think that if we want this to be a document that people can use and reference, we don't want any unnecessary text in here. And so I think this is the part of this charter that relates to our roles and responsibilities, which is what this section is. But it's clearly referenced, and so I think that I don't see a need to have the entire charter language in here.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts? My concern is that the charter language is, shall we say, broad. And if there was no rationale from other parts, that there might be some interpretive problems about, I don't know, because I'm looking at, it's hard to, Commissioner Van Leer?
Yeah, I just think as it's set, it's the duties and authority of the Community Police Commission. These are our rules, administrative rules. So it tells us what we're supposed to be doing. So I think this makes sense. I mean, if we want to somebody wants to volunteer to like go back and sort of make a case for including more, we can do that, but I don't think we'll be able to resolve it right now. So maybe somebody can take that on and say, I'm going to look at, what would be the rationale for including more and what value it would add. Otherwise, I think we should just, because you were saying that for the most part, we're going to be just figuring out who does what and what we need to change. So I don't see a need to change this, but if somebody feels like there is a need to change it, then we should take it up on the 21st when somebody has a proposal.
Okay, so we'll look at it again. I think these aren't, this is our bylaws, this section is not the administrative procedure. So my thought is just like the overall kind of system that we're in, that to give any reader of this would have some ideas. It's not like, a set of responsibilities, but the purpose of the charter. But we can take a look at it again. So I think it's not worth talking about now.
No, I'm fine. You just
Yeah,
answered
yeah.
what I was gonna ask.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll move on. 1.2. This is scope and weight of this operating manual and conflicts of law. So here, there is an issue, I think, when what we do with the legal conflict of interest. A written opinion. I see that we're still, we have I think a legal issue right now, and this rule is not 100% being followed, not necessarily to our, to my understanding, we have not received a written legal opinion from the city law director about our motions of late, about the mayor's letter from July. We've not received, right? We've received something similar meant for another group, but not received from the law director herself. And then, so the grants at this discretionary authority where there's a conflict of interest. So this portion, Jason, the first part, when a legal conflict arises related to, is the written legal opinion, that sentence is in the charter too? No?
So the chair, no, but I wouldn't recommend removing that. You can't have a conflict of imagination. You need some ground. So the first thing they have to do is make a ruling on a question in writing. Then you can say, we have a conflict with your ruling on this question. It's how it inherently works. Otherwise, if we don't define the conflict, everything can be a conflict in someone's imagination. And a phone conversation should not lead to conflicts. So you have to do it in writing so that you have a process. Now, what I have in my notes here is this is where you would insert, I wasn't part of the discussion of the process for how you determine a conflict, but it's my understanding that you have been given direction from the law department. My suggestion is this committee within the next 1 or 2 sessions takes what the law department says, debates it, and then adds it to here. So that way there is no longer a need to argue what happens after we think there's a conflict. There's a process in place for how to initiate the next step of that. So it's my understanding that you already have in writing a suggested process. You should be looking at that. You should be editing it and then quickly moving that to be part of your rules.
So I have a slight disagreement with that, because the problem is that we're in, according to our majority decision, in a conflict of interest, a conflict and adverse position with the city law director, who has not issued an opinion on this, to take his process. And just for viewership knowledge, it was a process that did not include any HR manual references. I don't know which processes have to be followed and which are just suggestions. I'm not suggesting that process is not good, but I think we should. I don't think we should just take it as gospel that this is what we should do.
I didn't say I have to agree with it, Chair. What I said is it gives you a starting point for a discussion. So I think it's admissible for consideration to this group to have a starting point for a discussion. You do need to have a process. It will come up again, and you can't delay moving forward if you have a conflict indefinitely forever because you don't have a process in place. It's just a process for what you do next and how you determine there is a conflict. So I've heard multiple arguments at multiple meetings about what is a conflict, how do we vote to agree that there's a conflict. All of those questions should be noted and rules should be written around those so that you have a firm procedure, not just for yourselves, but for commissioners moving forward. And we don't have to repeat this same cycle time and time again, regardless if there's a conflict already present, which I'm not allowed to discuss. So we're not going to go there with that specific conflict while I'm here. But what I will say is, you guys know how to write a rule that can be either grandfathered to the past, or you can say, this rule starts at the next conflict, right? So you have to make that determination. But that shouldn't delay your need to create a rule here, because this will come up time and time and time and time and time again. So.
Ms. Benito?
Yeah, my suggestion would be that we put that first on the agenda for the meeting on the 21st, and that everybody, I believe we all received that email from Law Director Griffin, and that we have that discussion about then putting that, or adding that into Rule 1.2.
Okay.
Or revising it, or whatever then next steps are, but I think that is really critical that we do that ASAP, so I would suggest that that's the first item on our agenda on the 21st.
So in the meantime, I will try to find out from Mr. Griffin which parts are must do and which part are suggestions. I found when I read through the process, there were multiple steps, and in a situation that a legal conflict arises, this is a legal conflict of interest between us and the city law department, which is a specific one that we don't want to waste time, right? So I think it's pretty clear from the charter that how we determine conflict of interest, which is not the scope because it says in our discretion. That is something that I would assume voting on it seems okay, debating and voting on it. However, because there's multiple steps, I want to make sure those timelines. So I think probably what we need to think about is between those steps, how much time do we allow to pass before we engage in another action to make sure, because we are at in some ways at the mercy of the law department in fulfilling writing those contracts and getting everything through. Are there any other things that we need to think about as we deal with that rule? And I don't want this rule, because what if we pass this rule, we get it through commission, they won't pass it. I don't think this should forestall our immediate legal needs right now. So that would be my suggestions in consideration of this rule. Because if this rule passed, it shouldn't prevent us from engaging what we very clearly need right now in terms of the attorney. Are there any other concerns? Okay. So I will try to get a little bit more clarity from the law department. Great. So that is, thank you. That was, I believe that I'm just going to ask after every rule, is there any public comment on any of these very quickly, 1 minute? Anybody? No. Okay. We'll move on to 1.3, ethical responsibilities. Are there any thoughts here? Mr. Thomason.
Yeah, so when I was reading through this, the main thing that I asked myself was, how do we determine if there is a violation? Because some of the terminology, some of the wording is broad in some ways. So what does that mean for us as a commission? So if we're reading through these responsibilities, and I believe if there's something, happening that's has been a violation, like what does that mean for us? And so I'm just thinking, broadly, like I know we're the Rules Committee, but we're not like the enforcers, So I just didn't really, when I asked myself that question, I didn't really have a solution to it. And so I just wanted to kind of put that out there to everyone. Was like, if we are reading through this and if we believe that there's something here that's a violation regarding ethical responsibilities, like what does that mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a great question. To my understanding, there's not really an enforcement mechanism within the charter. We actually can't even remove each other. That is up to the mayor and council. So I guess that is like the big question that's in the room, like about all these rules, is what does enforcement look like? So I just welcome your thoughts on this. How do we, because we have, shall we say, been creative in fulfilling some of our rules, and short of calling someone out, which is not, I think, very effective necessarily in getting the rules fulfilled. I'm a little concerned that the rules were not read very carefully. So that's one way I think we can, how do we facilitate not the enforcement of the rules, but the fulfillment of the rules, which is, I think, everybody's mission here. Mr. Goodrich.
So on this point, I do have something to say, having observed you all for 8 months. There is complete casual disregard for your rules that you set out, and I'm not saying that everyone does that, but it's been observed enough times by the community, by other commissioners that brought it to my attention, right? So do not disregard the importance of what Commissioner Donaldson raised. You can get creative here, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are plenty of bodies out there that put rules on themselves for how to enforce the rules. So the first thing, someone needs to research this, right? We'd be happy to help as staff on what the possible ways that you can police yourselves. No one else is going to police you, but they will criticize you, right? And some of these violations probably would rise to the standard of bringing it to the attention of the authorities who could possibly remove someone if it were deemed by this commission to do so. So to not do anything about it is, what is the point then of having these two sections? And I'm talking about adding professional work experience expectations in here too, because both of these two sections lay out clearly what your responsibilities are ethically, and then also what your responsibilities are to each other professionally. And without having a mechanism for enforcing these, then what's the point of having these two things in here? Because, it has been brought to our attention by numerous people that they believe there's been violations of these rules already. And then they're saying, well, you're not even able to police yourselves. How are you capable of oversight of anyone else? So start by getting your own house clean. And I would strongly recommend that one or two of you get together, really research what's possible with other boards and bodies for how you enforce violations of both ethics and your expectations that you set out for yourself. If something's too harsh in there, by all means, change it. Sometimes, like with the attendance thing, we might have set the bar too harsh, right? And we recognize that, and that's fine. So go over these carefully. These are probably the two most important sections, the ones where we're criticized the most for if we don't honor what we wrote down. So if you don't like what you wrote down, change it. If you can't live in it, change it. But if you're committing to it, commit to it, because you have to hold yourself to a higher standard as an oversight board.
So not to identify any specific commissioners, but could you give us some specific examples of things that we violated in this rule, just to give us an idea? I do think that we shouldn't be shy away from saying this rule was broken by this commissioner.
And I'm not going to the chair, respectfully, I'm not going to do that. You've all been present for your own meetings where you have called each other out for violation of the rules multiple times. You can go back and watch videos. So you all know where you are in these situations. It's not a blanket accusation, right? But as an entire body, if we ignore the behavior that we see that's in violation of the rules, then how are we able to enforce the police? Because that's what we criticize the police of doing, is ignoring their own rules, the law sometimes, right? And then handling it internally. You have to hold yourself to a higher standard. And I think these are the two most important sections in this rule, and you absolutely need accountability on this board.
Mr. Van Leer?
Yeah, so this is a helpful conversation. Co-chair Ridgway and I had a meeting with parliamentarians. There's this local association of parliamentarians, and we didn't go into the enforcement piece, but we did talk about some of the ways that really following Robert's Rules of Order more closely would potentially help us. But we did not really go into how do you enforce it. So I think that I would certainly be willing to continue that conversation, and maybe even staff could participate if you want, and I would be happy to come back with some more ideas on that, because he was willing to talk through some of that. So, yeah.
However, I do agree with Mr. Donaldson. I don't know. The reason I want some specific instances is these are very broad words, personal integrity, commitment, truthfulness, fortitude. I want, maybe there's a way to write this much more concretely, this rule. One thing that I think is missing that encompasses these values is that there are definitely commissioners that have been more active in participating than others. I will say myself that a lot of, it's starting to affect my other work, the amount of time that I have been working on these issues. So I think that to me is a concrete expectation we should have of all our commissioners, that there should be some equity in the workload. That's something concrete, because everything else are, yeah, they're so abstract, some of these things. So if we can add maybe some things that can actually help us achieve some type of balance among the commissioners concretely, that would be nice.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think one of the things that we discussed with the parliamentarian was sort of setting some, for example, time slots, time limitations for how much people can speak, how people are recognized, and really and also how you treat each other during meetings or outside of meetings, how you talk to each other, not attacking the motivation of other members of the commission. So those were some very concrete things that would help potentially in our meetings. But again, enforcement, we have to also think about how do we enforce that and what that looks like. But again, I would be happy to have a conversation with him. If you all want to give me questions, I'm writing down these notes here about policing ourselves, equity or workload. I would be happy to go back to this person and sort of see what they would suggest from a Robert's Rules perspective. That might be helpful to us.
Yeah, because I think Robert's was pretty clear about those rules, and it may be just about bringing Robert's rules into our rules explicitly. Again, with even things like, it says in Robert's, basically one Robert's rule would prevail everything, which is argue the measure and not the man, right? Is the Robert's rule.
And I was gonna say,
But-
do we have anything in place now in the current rules that speaks to that, like the decorum and the?
We can add that. We have the decorum that says Robert's rules, but my concern is I think there are different interpretations of
We
what,
need something very specific as
And-
far as.
and that may be just a learning process, Mr. Van Leer, with the parliamentarian correcting us as we go along gingerly, and then people will start hopefully enforcing these rules themselves.
I think it's also, there's different, as you said, there's different interpretations and understandings, but it's also about putting things specifically in our rules so that's not just like, oh, it's all Robert's rules, but it's like, okay, we're going to bring
This
in
specific
very
Robert's
specifics
rule,
about how do we implement Robert's rules, because there are different types. One thing you said was there's small group, Robert's rules for small group and Robert's rules for large group, and they're very different in how so I think just saying, oh, Robert's rules is the way we're going to go doesn't always help. And there might be specific places where we need to say, this will happen, this will happen, this.
Right.
So our rules will take precedence over
Robert's rule.
any understanding of Robert's rules, but it's still rooted in Robert's rules. So
Right, and Robert's rule, sometimes it takes like three situations to find the situation that we are engaging with right then. So I think we should make it easier, because we face these scenarios. I wanted to, Mr. Jackson had a comment.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, this part of the rules is extremely important. I would like for you guys to look at, as you look at the language that you have there for the expectations of workflow, expectations of the commissioners. Please take a look at the GPOs that you guys are going to be looking at for the officers. You'll find similar language, which oftentimes for the officers is a bit confusing because it's extremely broad there, and it opens up the door to subjectivity. As to this time, I believe this officer is in violation, and this time the officer isn't. Keep in mind, if you're going to hold the officers to that level of scrutiny, then you leave your language to be so that you guys are held to that same language. If you're going to change your language to make yours more concrete, then you should really think about changing the GPO to make it concrete as well, so that you guys are being held to the same standard. Additionally, as part of the enforcement situation, I can only offer this one suggestion. The Rules Committee historically have been the ones to actually point out where there's a possible violation. The format for that has been that whoever the head of the Rules Committee is will then take that information to the co-chairs. And unfortunately for the co-chairs, because it's a really, really tough job, nobody really wants to do it. That's the reason why we rotate it every year, because nobody wants to have to be the bad guy. But unfortunately, it's up to the co-chairs to actually do the enforcement once that information is brought to them. So that was one of the thought processes by making a co-chair every year, because if somebody wants to do it again, then okay, other people don't want to be the bad guy. But the co-chairs have to be the bad guys in this. They're gonna have to be the ones that enforce those rules. Thank you.
And so that they're, I have, obviously not every single time, because there's a lot of, and we're growing. I have sent out emails occasionally about patterns of rules that are been broken, but it does not, again, we get to the same problem of enforcement. And again, hopefully, if we can write the rules in such a way that's more concrete, we won't have as much of an enforcement issue, because we won't have as much of a violation issue. Pete, have you, Ms. Benito?
You can finish with that.
No, I just think that this might be too heavy of a workload. If we all can, this rule is so important, if we can all think about some ideas and bring this back for this rule, that would be good. Okay, and then specifically, Pete, if you can research the enforcements of other boards and, whatever, and then we can task him with that, and then what the parliamentarian would recommend. All right, Ms. Benito.
I had a couple ideas, but I don't know if we want to weigh on that. But my thoughts are, thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. On this, I think I had a couple ideas. And the first was kind of similar, building off of what Sergeant Jackson said, that whoever, and I'm not sure if it needs to go through the Rules Committee and then be sent to the co-chairs, or maybe if somebody wants to say, hey, I feel that this rule has been violated, maybe they CC the chair of the Rules Committee to the co-chairs, and then, the co-chairs address the conversation with the commissioner. And then I would suggest having almost like a PIP, right? A performance improvement plan, where they, with the co-chairs and the commissioner, come together and, address a plan for these are the things that are going to change. Maybe we say that there's a 3-month period to.
No, I get what you're, yeah.
But I think there also needs to be a time period allotted from the time the rules chair submits the complaint or the issue to the chairs of when they address it.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
There needs to be some type of process. Like this whole process needs to take a certain amount of time. So they shouldn't be able to just let it linger for months. It needs to be addressed within a
Yeah, for
time
sure.
period.
Yeah, and just to finish kind of my thought of the process, I agree with you. That maybe there's a 3-month period. And the reason why I say 3 months is that, some of the stuff, if you only have a full commission meeting once a month, then 1 month isn't really enough to demonstrate a pattern of adhering to it. So you have a 3-month period. And then, if there's additional violations of that within that 3-month period.
I think maybe the co-chairs can weigh in on what their capacity is and what a potential turnaround period could be for a complaint of a rule violation.
Could I finish the process? So then the 3-month period would pass, and that would be kind of like a probationary period where they're on this this improvement plan. If at the end of that 3-month period they come back to review it, if the issue has, there's been continued, violations, or the things that they were said they were going to do. For example, if someone, makes a, it could be something like they're required to take some sort of training, or they're required to improve their attendance, or whatever that might be, that's built together. And then at the end of the 3-month period, if that hasn't been addressed, then maybe it's sent to the full commission for a vote on whether to send it to the mayor, maybe it's sent to the mayor.
And I do think that
That's just an idea.
that's worth us looking at, but also thinking if we think about something like this, the severity of the violation
Has to be
considered.
taken account.
Yeah.
Right, and I think, if I could just make I'm not responding, poorly to your suggestion. It's just that we are where we are. I think we all know some of the struggles we've had as a commission, and I'm just worried from kind of a humanistic route, what that could lead to, including if Certain people will be judged differently, I think, certain commissioners than others, and held to different standards. That's already happening, and that's kind of the problem. And I think that also certain rules have to be made so explicit. I just want to give one example. When Commissioner Zayed and I learned, how to do a point of order, I very happily saw other people use that, but it wasn't used correctly, because it should not. There should be generally an understanding. You can't interrupt most people except for very narrow, and you have to state the reason. So what I see there is a potential for your very well-meaning idea to be leveraged or in ways that I think are not going to be equal. So I think we really need to think about it. I don't think we should be making any more rules that are, I guess, like what would require, what type of action would necessitate the mayor for their election of duty or whatever gross neglect of duty. But we have to designate those things. I am not comfortable with saying, oh, someone violates, the point of order 10 times, therefore we send it to the mayor. We have to really have, if we have a discipline matrix, I think for the police, we should probably have something here. But again, I'm still worried. It's just I understand that will give us some structure, but really, if we can just be on the same page about respecting each other and the rules, the general rules of decorum, I hope that we don't have to get to that point that we're going to have a matrix of discipline for ourselves, right? It's everyone's letting outside, because we know how the matrix is not probably going to be like real life, and it's going to potentially erode even more kind of trust and relationships between us. So I'm just, and I don't, this because it's starting to turn into a very corporatized, like HR type of thing. So I'm worried about that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. That was just kind of the beginning of a potential process we could use. The additional thing that I would like to see us add is a conflict mediation, a rule around conflict mediation, and a potential process that is used, because I think that one challenge that we've had is a lot of conflicts between commissioners, and right now there's no real set process for how to, for how to work through that. So I think that's something, and I can do some research on
Okay.
what that could look like, but that would be something that I would address in addition to when thinking about challenges with rule violations. I do think that a lot of the root of some of the rule violations that we see are conflicts between commissioners, and so I feel like having a process that would address, would help address that, would also help address some of the other challenges with the rules.
I understand, but if those conflicts are not, I think sometimes there's a tendency to see that our conflicts, because we're very passionate people, are of a personal nature when they are of a strategic and ideological difference. And I personally don't think that mediation necessarily will help in that. So I don't also want it that the public is removed from our ability to actively debate these issues. 13 of us represent, so I would hate to do things behind the scenes in that way, but I get you.
I didn't say that it would be behind the scenes.
You would do mediation in a meeting?
I didn't say either
Okay.
way. You would say
Okay,
that.
but I don't see any other, okay, so it sounds like we're gonna bring all of our ideas back for this. I generally, maybe if I can recommend that when we see the values, can we think of instances, specific instances that where those values were not met for us and are, and if we can be more explicit, be more concrete, because I see a lot of abstract language here, which is hard, I think hard for people to follow. All right, so moving on to one point. Go ahead.
I think that, to the chair and to the committee members, I think that it would be easier to respond or implement or enforce different rules if they, going back to what former Commissioner Richard said, if it's very spelled out and but we have had some issues that have come before the full commission and before the chair that it wasn't specifically enough to even know what we were supposed to do on it, or there was not a good understanding of it. And a good example would be the absentee, where it was almost totally redone, after the fact. So there are things that, and I know that some people don't agree, but that's okay. I would just like to say that when you talk about having very clear rules, it's easier to be able to identify the violations. If it's very broad, it's not as easy, and it allows for more subjectivity in how we would discipline or how it will be enforced. I also want to say that in our meeting with Mr. Labisi, and that was the parliamentarian we met with, he felt that perhaps there should be 3 sort of mini workshops that he could do with the commission, and one of them was on decorum. That was one, if I recall. Another one was on small group, larger group committees. There were 3, and the other one was on the hierarchy of rules, in terms of how our bylaws or our rules would interact with the state or with the city's laws. So he offered for our he talked about the hierarchy. He talked about the decorum. We looked at issues where, where there have been some conflict within the commission, and those were the 3 from that discussion he thought that we could benefit from as a commission. So I just want to put those on the table. We mentioned it a little bit this morning in leadership. I know that it will require a quote because it may be something we have to go out, to bid for. But I do believe that kind of information and potential training should be coming to the full commission, so that all of us are on the same page when it comes to this.
Okay, thank you. I do hear, not to frick a little bit. I think what's happened in this interaction might be representative of some things that could help. I think that should not have been a discussion. I think we should have canvassed everybody for their, like you guys could have come to the meeting, but I think other commissioners have at different times viewed things differently. I mean, if the information was only from you two, your perspective of what is going on in the meeting, and then the decisions are made based on what you said, you're saying that there's workshops that are going to be done?
No, that's not what I said. What I said was, given some of the scenarios that were presented, he offered to do 3 workshops. It was no decision made on it. One was decorum, one was small group, large group, and what do we say? Oh, the hierarchy. Those were the 3. And helping to understand how our rules may relate to Robert's rules, or how they both may relate to state, and city law. So he offered that these might be the kinds of workshops we might be interested in. There were no decisions made coming out of that meeting at all. I think the one thing that did come out in instances where certain situations were pointed out within our bylaws or within our rules, I think, Pete, you jotted those down and said these may be things that you want to bring to the Rules Committee at some point for discussion, but there were no decisions made there. And the reality is the full commission cannot meet with everybody on everything. At some point, there needs to be a trust of the chairs to be able to carry out the work of the commission. And I think that we made, a concerted effort based on the dynamics within this group to try to resolve some of the issues that were made by bringing in, and I think we had talked about this parliamentarian earlier, because I had reached out to what I thought was a Cleveland chapter, but it's a state chapter, and there were, he's local. But so this has been put on the table before in terms of having a discussion with a parliamentarian. This is not new.
However,
This isn't new.
Chair Ridgway, if I may, I didn't say that everybody had to participate. I would just wish in the future that you would gather the opinions of everybody's experiences on the commission. And as the rules chair, I didn't know that this meeting was happening. There was no problem of quorum. I don't think that Mr. Vanley was trying to exclude me. And I'm just asking for more participation because perspectives are different about what is happening on that could help the commission. And if I think that diversity of thought would have been good, not that we all arrive at the meeting, but that you guys could have presented it to the parliamentarian.
Well, I let Commissioner Van Leen.
Yeah, so, I think it was our last rules meeting that I offered to reach out to the parliamentarian and there was no condition set on how I would approach that. And I was having a conversation with the co-chair and I had one conversation with this parliamentarian and the two of us met with him and there was, again, no decisions made. This is all just gathering information and there'll be other opportunities to, if we so choose, to interact with either this person or a different person. So I really don't understand your concern because I did offer to do this in our last meeting and it was sort of like
I think
consensus
that-
to do it.
Well, I think honestly, I mean, to send the co-chair rather than the chair of the rules committee for this, I thought you were just reaching out to people. I'm not blaming you, Pete. But you know, it is, I appreciate, but we could have at least canvassed everybody's perspectives on this.
There's more opportunities.
Yes, there are more.
Well, I just want to make sure that, because it seems, we do have differences of perspectives on this that are very,
There will be plenty of opportunity to raise those in the future. If we so choose, there will be opportunities.
All right,
to do
so-
I think we
Madam Chair, I just want to think, I'm glad that we're considering this. I also would like to point another perspective is that pretty soon we will have our attorney. So especially when we talk about hierarchy of parliamentary procedure, the attorney will hopefully be more understanding of state and charter, and that will help. So the reality is, if we put something in our bylaws that is in conflict of something possibly of state or in charter, it could be null and void because that would trump depending on certain situations. So it just depends on what it is, right? So I think the workshop might be helpful and might help to get more understanding because I'm not a parliamentarian, but that's my understanding. And I know I've mentioned the hierarchy of parliamentary procedure, but it just really depends on the situation and the scenario. So I think when we implement, definitely having our attorney present and hopefully they are well versed in these things, not necessarily parliamentary, but the legal aspects of particularly some of these issues. And that's all.
right, but I do want to make sure that the lawyer we have, according to the charter, I mean, Delante and the city law department are supposed to be our standing attorneys. This would be only, are you suggesting that whatever attorney?
I'm not talking about
Oh, the other attorney.
Yeah, our soon
other
new
student.
position that will be able hopefully to be dedicated and will be able to really look into certain issues, especially if it's contracts or something like that. So that might be something, another layer.
So yeah, it reminds me of other recommendations from this parliamentarian who said that it might be possible if once we have our attorney there's people who could help train him to a certain degree to get to the point where he could also act to some degree as our parliamentarian. The other thing that he mentioned was that they have monthly meetings, this local parliamentarian group, and people would be welcome to come and ask questions. And you know, if you have to officially join or something, it's very inexpensive, but they have these regular meetings, and that's an opportunity for people to learn informally outside of our meetings. But the idea of workshops and trainings, and then those are two other things you mentioned.
Thank you. One thing I did want to mention, Chair, Co-Chair, I do hear you about being specific. I also worry that sometimes it gets so specific that we miss also the forest, you know, that there are things. Once something becomes so specific, you can also go around those things because then the specificity determines, someone could say, you know, well, this actual specific incident was not mentioned. So I think in the end, rules are never going to be perfect, 100% airtight. It's about the people, and we should try to find ways that we can dedicate ourselves to fulfilling and holding ourselves accountable first, and not each other. Okay, thank you so much. 1 point, so what are we on? Are we on 1.332? All right, so I see potential for a lot of enforcement here. So what are your thoughts about this one? Sergeant Van Leer.
I feel like we've kind of covered this. I mean, it sort of fits into as Commissioner Director Goodrick said before, like both 1.3.1 and 1.3.2 are kind of connected and fall into the same bucket. So I feel like we've kind of talked about this a lot, and
So
everything
again,
we've been saying is sort of,
yeah.
can apply to this unless there are specifics that people.
So I guess it's the enforcement here again too, right? And the accountability. Let's not say enforcement, it sounds but accountability. So to think maybe whatever we decide for accountability can be, a mechanism can be pasted here. Commissioner Benito?
I wanted, because I know we have an action item of bringing some ideas for this. I wanted to suggest that, sometimes we get pretty deep in discussions. And so I think that if the goal really is to next week, we're on the 21st, try to pass some of this stuff, I would maybe suggest that we assign certain people to come up with a couple different proposals.
That's what, that was my intent, is then we would sign them and we would actually have drafts that we can hopefully be near finalization. And if we don't pass all of them, I will put them in an order of what our immediate needs are.
Yeah.
Some of the other ones, maybe enforcement, maybe require a longer conversation. Right?
Yes. Do we want to assign a couple people to do the proposal of an enforcement procedure? Or sorry,
Wasn't Mr. Van Leer going to do that? Or
I will talk to the parliamentarian, but if other people have other sources
I
they
think-
want to look at.
I think
feel
these three sections are very important. So why don't we all bring our ideas? We can just write language for it, and then we can see if we can insert it.
Okay.
And then if Mr. Van Leer has like a template that we can put things in.
To the chair.
Yeah.
I highly recommend that, you bring back workable drafts
Mhm.
if you want to pass anything on the 21st. Otherwise, you're going to
Right.
leave this on the table. You're only to the third rule, and that's a lot of work. And you're looking at the rest of this volume. So to do this in 2 sessions is a heavy lift already. So I would suggest with the remainder of your time, you pick the most important ones, assign people to draft something, put that draft out early, not a couple days before the 21st, but early. Let people comment on it, come back with a workable draft for a vote or discussion. That's the most expedient way to do it. Otherwise, you will be in this same loop you're in tonight, where you're not making a lot of forward progress in the time allotted, because your agenda was for the whole rules and you're only on 1-3. So.
Right. Okay, that would have been my suggestion too. So why don't we draft, but I think these 3 sections are very important, very dense, probably require 5 heads on this would be better than 1. So, and he can research, Mr. Van Leer can research the best practices.
So
Okay.
I think I agree with Executive Director Goodrich that, if all 5 of us were to come up with written text of actual procedure and then send it to one another, I think that absolutely 5 heads is better than 1. But my concern is just saying, come to the next meeting with ideas is not.
No, I wanted drafts. I said that at the beginning. I wanted drafts. Yeah.
Okay, so all 5 of us are going to draft.
I think we would send our ideas to him, and if it
And he'll make a
overlaps,
draft?
and he'll make a draft. So,
Okay.
all right. And the
Okay.
draft is, like just revising these 2 sections, and it could be adding. I think 1.32 just needs an additional enforcement provision. All right, so let's go through.
I just wanted to add, I know that Executive Director Goodrich mentioned earlier, staff can assist us with researching and finding things. Okay, just wanted to put that out there.
All right. Thank you, Ryan,
To the
for
chair,
agreeing to help us.
yes, we're always here. However, we go on specifics. So if you say, we would like you to specifically work on this, we can't just leave it open and then the expectation is we were supposed to do something. So, if Pete is drafting that, Commissioner Van Leer knows to reach out to me if he needs assistance or what specific level of assistance. So same with anyone else who gets something assigned. If you need a specific thing, the sooner we know that, the better. Like if you give us the topic, we'll research it and get it back to you as quick as we can. So.
Okay, great. Okay. Yes, go ahead. It is 7:12 though.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a request that at 7:30 we move to this. The 1.7.7.1.
We have 15 minutes to get through the rest. If there's,
I'm not
okay.
saying that, I'm just saying that at 7:30.
Okay, well, what is that, 1.7, right?
So the chair, you had asked me where we should focus based on my opinion on the phone. If you would like, I can tell you, not every rule in here needs to be reopened.
Right.
This is supposed to be based on experiences so far and targeted, saying people believe, that there was an issue here or there might have been an issue here. Because at this point, I would recommend you always do this, is keep good notes. So when you have this, this is coming every year, right? You should already be keeping good notes as commissioners on where you think there should be an improvement point. And when you draft an agenda like tonight, you can target those specific rules instead of reading the whole rule book and saying, where do we think here? So if you like, I can give you a few places that I've kept notes to help you get to your goal this evening
Okay.
of getting
Well,
through
why
the
don't we
whole
just,
thing.
I think we can get to that soon. Let's just continue because that 1.4, that's a whole section change. I'm at 1.44. There's nothing, I'm just gonna go through it, Mr. Goodrich, to just stop me if there's anything. We don't see anything until 1.44, right? Because that's a lot of charter language. Okay, and leadership, okay, I think there is something here in 1.44. Yes?
So in my notes here, and also some discussion this morning with the co-chairs, it is about further defining the duties and powers of the co-chairs based on what you guys have accumulated in your knowledge so far, right? So not only the advice of the parliamentarian, inherent things that you all have experienced with leadership and how you think it can be improved, refining what the duties are, what the powers are. That is what I would recommend here. Specifically defining what their roles are in the committee. So, here we have the co-chairs with us this evening. It's their choice to be, part of this or not part of this. Do they get to vote right now under the rules? They could vote technically because it doesn't prohibit, it's ex officio. Although I think there's another section later on that mentions only active members of a committee can vote. It's one of those conflict sections after looking at it, right? Of what does that mean? Because technically they are active members of this committee. And right now, that's what ex officio means. So that's one point that I have there, is that. Also, moving through leadership, it's going to come up is what is a committee chair's role? So we've talked about co-chairs. Now I think we need to also define a little more about what a committee chair's definition is, what they're responsible for, what they can and cannot do, what they do. So those are in the leadership section. Those are the two major points that I have is definitely look at going through each of those points of what the duties and responsibilities of the co-chair are. See if you agree, see if you think it needs some refinement, just like before, to further define that. And then also, establishing what a committee chair's role is and saying what they can and cannot do.
So the ex officio, I think we could just remove that term. I mean, what happened, Mr. Van Leer and Ms. Syed were not on the committee. What happened is that our intention, we were given erroneous information about what ex officio meant. And we had agreed on a motion that the co-chairs can participate in the meeting but would not be able to vote. So I think just removing that word may resolve that contradiction. And were there any other specific things that we need to discuss really quickly in that session?
I thought our goal here was to sort of assign,
yeah.
just like not get into the discussion here, but assign. This seems
Well,
like
if
a thing
there-
staff could do. Right?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, is there any specific, let's just actually go through and just make the list, and then, is there anything
Well, the
else?
first step would be feedback, right? So that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. Everyone was supposed to come with specific feedback this evening based on what I heard, but then I don't feel like we were fully ready to be here, but we are. So the reality is it's based on experience, right? So if people feel like something should be changed or considered, we need to get that back now, and we'll also do the research of how to improve. Otherwise, if you've seen the Roberts Rule Book, it's this big. You can make co-chairs this powerful, or you can make them this powerful, right? Do you even want to have co-chairs anymore? You have to ask yourself these questions and then come up with people who can write down what they think the answer is for consideration. It's not one person's opinion that's going to prevail. Because remember, this has to go before the body. So there's a lot of different opinions. We need to get, if your goal is to get through this by the 21st, you have to find a quick way to hone it down and get it to something.
Right, so that's what I was asking for, that feedback through these. If we don't have them, we can just assign it to a person and you can send the feedback. If you can, Mr. Goodrich, or could you keep track of who is assigned to which one, and we'll send out the schedule and then we'll be on the email. If there's nothing else, we can move on to 1.45.
Yeah, Madam Chair, so
Yeah.
I would like to say as a co-chair, I think it's important that I have my voice. As we see overall, I do not disrupt the committees, and I think overall, the committees function. However, ex officio has very specific, things that go along, and I'm unsure why in the middle of 8 months, all of a sudden, we're taking the term out. And I think there are good reasons why a co-chair should vote. So for example, if there is a committee that may not, that has a chair that may not be able to perform its duties, and maybe there may be difficulty with having that chair in there, I think that may be an instance where the co-chairs may have a vote may come into perspective. I don't think the co-chair should, enforce any opinion or will, but I think there are specific instances which can probably be spelled out where the co-chairs may be important in a vote.
Well, this was not brought up. I do want to make a very solid point of clarification. I really would appreciate you not muddying the water on this. We had voted on this earlier in a motion. Please don't interrupt me. So this is not something that was brought up in 8 months. It was never the intention when we discussed it in the Rules Committee, when you and Co-Chair Ridgway were on the Rules Committee, that voting powers would be given to the chair, the co-chairs. There is an additional problem because if you guys vote, it represents a quorum of the entire commission.
If we vote in a certain way. So again, there are specifics that if you write it in there, that can be within the bylaws.
Well, that
So
would
if
be-
we all seven, yes, all seven of us vote one way, that would favor a quorum of the whole commission. So in that instance, I do agree. But the reality is, and I've mentioned this in our meeting, that it would be very, very, the probabilities of that happen are slim for all seven commissioners to vote
That's-
one way.
that-
But I do think that should be a caveat in the bylaws when that comes up.
Again, a point of correction, that is not correct, I believe, because we will be a quorum of the commission. So no matter how we vote, it
That's
will
not,
be,
what you're saying is inaccurate. If you vote in one way,
no, so you're
that will
saying,
carry
no.
the weight of the commission, the full commission.
That's not correct because we had a vote that was a 5-3-3 vote, that was not a 7 vote, and it still carried the majority. It's about the majority within a quorum. So if you even, it doesn't matter if we all vote one way or whatever, 7 would represent.
So we're not changing it tonight, so we can have this debate as a draft is proposed, but we don't have to have this now. In the interest of time, I feel like we're debating a rule that hasn't even been changed and there's no draft. So this is all, everyone's passionate about it, there's no right or wrong answer, this is the world that we have to live in.
Right.
So we can have, thoughtful debate,
Yeah, and
on it
then-
when we have a draft.
I want to say that this was not brought up just now. We voted on this, and let's move on. Thank you. We did vote on, we voted.
Who's assigned to do this work?
Assigned to do the section.
On
Is it
this,
staff or is it, what do y'all?
I would be happy to take a stab at it.
I would also be happy to take a stab at it. All right, 1.45 committees.
To the chair, just 1.2, you do need to establish your permanent voting procedure for co-chairs too. If you
Okay.
want to do that later, you can, but you're doing this whole manual now, you might as well codify what you decided is best for that. That's part of this leadership section as well. So if you can just, maybe whoever takes on this part can also just include that as a suggestion to get that over with, or you'll
Okay,
have to
let's-
do that.
Let's move on. Thank you. 1.45, the committees. The one suggestion that's come to me from the community is that the Grants and Budget Committee, they could be separated. It just seemed to be a lot of, not necessarily overlapping work, but that was the only recommendation I had there. Because it will be the budget committee that, it will be like a standing committee, but it would just be separated. We had actually even talked about that because there were 6 on that Grants and Budget Committee before.
I don't think that we should make that decision without a conversation with the grant and budget committee.
That's fine. No, I'm just
Yeah.
saying that was just something that was offered because it's not necessarily, it seems like there's a lot of work there and the budget will have to be advocated for in February, is it, Jason?
Yes.
Okay, so that is actually a very active committee, even though, all right, so committees are established. Anything else in that section? 1.46 staff. This is charter language, skip through that. Removal of the executive director is also charter language. Staffing levels. Is this highlighted for a reason, Jason? Additional staffing shall be approved by the commission?
No, only that it could be edited. That's why that's highlighted, is that you can, so the first part is quoting the charter, the second part is opening it to being changed if need be. Do you want me to finish where I saw the conflicts as you would ask me to do?
Yeah, I'm just going through it. I'm just, in case they have, I just want to go in a linear fashion. If they have things and you overlap. 1.461, no? Nothing? Anybody? Nothing? What's the next one that someone has? And then we'll go to Jason. Okay, Jason.
Okay, so you're already addressing attendance, so that was in my notes, that has come up. Chronic absenteeism, you have that on it. So skipping ahead, the other things that I've seen issues on are quorum and voting. You can look at specifically, an issue that's come up is we don't have a tiebreaker procedure. And there has been some debate over methods of voting on certain votes. So you may want to look at that. And then if you want to keep it that all motions are carried by a majority, or if you feel like there are some so important you need the 2/3. So that's something that has come up. We're considering some of those things are in the charter that require 2/3. I think the only one that's in there is removal of the executive director. Otherwise, right now, your standard is all motions are by majority. So some boards and bodies think that there are things so important that require, and I think the only other thing we do that for is changing of a rule. Right. So to get all of your new rules passed, you're going to need 9 votes according to your bylaws. And even to change that to a lower standard, you would have to meet that 9 first. So those are the only 2 things off the top of my head where right now you have more than a majority vote for. So those are the areas you need a tiebreaker procedure.
Because the committees are now, some of the committees are even
Yes,
numbered.
because, and you can even have that oddity where you have absences leave you with an even number of commissioners during a full commission meeting. And the only way we have to break a tie right now is to go back to debate until someone changes their mind. And that's unlikely in most of our meetings. So.
What was, there was also in the co-chair thing, did you miss one about?
Oh, the other thing I have is, sorry, that is in my notes about setting agendas. You can motions, when a motion, what the procedure is for putting a motion on an agenda ahead of time to solidify that so there's no future conflict over that, is what are the rules for when a motion can be made. Be more specific about that. I feel like it's coming up a lot. Like, what is the right time to make a motion? And who has authority to stop a motion if anyone does, right? So I feel like those questions have come up. Those are in my notes as well. So those are other points where we've had conflict, and that is under decorum, or you can put it under the agenda items where it talks about motions. You can then have a section on motions. So either one of those would be preferred, but that's another area.
To the chair and the committee, that was another topic that we discussed with the parliamentarian. There are only 3 instances that require a 2/3 vote. So there are all of that information that we need to talk about. Also talked about rescinding and replacing existing motions that have been approved. What kind of notice must be given and when it must be given in order to replace or rescind a previously approved motion. So all of that was part of the of the, the decorum discussion that we had with Mr. Levisi. That's why I think it is important at some point for us to be able to hear from him. He did make it very clear that a parliamentarian is not a legal authority. Those are two different positions, but that, an attorney can in fact help us with developing the rules and the procedures for the commission. So I just wanted to put that on the table because we did talk about those votes, when it's appropriate, when notices must be given to rescind or replace a motion. All of that was part of our discussion with Mr. Levisi.
Ms. Meja, thank you.
I think, and I don't know whether this would be something that would go into the meeting section or the co-chair section, but one thing that I think would be nice to have is that there's a call for agenda items from commissioners where the co-chair send out a request, perhaps 2 weeks in advance, and then there's an opportunity for commissioners to request items to be added to the agenda. And I know that I have not typically seen the agenda 1 week prior to the meeting, so I think that's another.
We don't do that. We don't do that.
Well, but there could also be a call for, if we can agree on a time, a deadline with which agenda items can be considered, and there also could be emergencies. However, I think our desire, all these rescinding and everything like that, our desire is for all of the commissioners' voices to be heard if they have a motion to be put forward. So if that is done beforehand, we won't have these other issues. So I would definitely advocate for something like that. And there could, but I think Robert's rules does say that if it's under new business, anybody can introduce a motion. So I don't want to remove that possibility, but I think. I would like to go to, personally, I would like to go to a meeting. I would like to see the motion written down in paper. I think that would be good. So there's no confusion.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that a lot of our kind of animation about this is because it seems like some things are coming out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So.
Madam
Can I
Chair.
finish?
Sorry.
So I was going to suggest that we create a process that identifies when. That we create a process that identifies, when a request goes out to commissioners, when's the deadline for commissioners to submit items for consideration for the agenda, and for commissioners to make sure that we're getting that agenda at least 1 week prior. I think the other thing that I would like to see from the leadership section is, and I think I do not envy the job of the co-chairs being co-chairs for first time for this commission, and so I recognize that you guys have had a heavy lift. One thing that I have felt is sometimes a little bit out of the loop of what I know you guys are having meetings. I know that you're doing important work for the commission, but I often feel like I don't really know what that is, and so I would love to see, report out to the commission on things that meetings that are had and takeaways. I know you've started doing the leadership minutes. I haven't seen those in a couple
We
weeks.
had a break.
Yeah.
Certain things, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think that, and that's been really helpful. But, I also, in the last commission meeting, Co-Chair Ridgway shared some really interesting comments about different meetings that you've had with people. And I know for me, I would love to know about what's coming out of the meetings with the monitoring team, or when you're meeting with specific people. So I do think that, and I think part of the challenge of the rules is you don't want to make it too prescriptive, right? Because every co-chair is going to have a different style, and but I also feel like sometimes without the absence of a structure, it just makes it a little bit harder for you guys can't meet our expectations if you don't know what the expectations are. So that is another kind of area that I was kind of hoping we could address.
Yeah.
So do you
So I
not
would
think?
say that I like the idea of having it ahead of time, especially the motion, because one of the duties for the co-chairs is to ensure that it's in order and it's following those different kind of laws of hierarchy, right? So we try our best, and I think definitely the attorney. So sometimes if we have that notice ahead of time, that will help with that. So it's not to silence any voice. So I just want to be clear. And I do think having those leadership meeting notes, and I think just overall working on communication will help us move forward. So thank you for that.
To the chair, may I?
Mhm.
So I have, right now I have, the, ethics and, professional responsibilities, is going to Commissioner Van Leer, along with creating accountability draft. I have leadership, Chair Wong and, Chair Benito will be working on that. And that covers some of these things with the co-chairs and the rules and elections of co-chairs. But what's outstanding is we can probably umbrella these motions, quorums, and votes into a team if a couple of commissioners want to take that on along with us, and that will divide it amongst 3 different sections to cover all of those things for the next.
Can I volunteer both of you to do that one? Okay, great. And then, I think we are almost at Commissioner Benito's, so we're done with 1.7? I think so. I do, in 1.71, go ahead.
I have
Sorry.
a question about 1.74 for your emergency meetings.
Can we get to that? We're at 1.71.
Okay.
Okay, 1.71, I do have, I've received multiple comments about public comment and where I'm asking if 1.71, the schedule of the meeting is a firm schedule, because there has been active requests from the community, to have a way to, maybe address towards the beginning, but also towards the end to respond. This is, I've seen other commissions, they will respond after every agenda item very quickly. If our intent is to gather feedback and participation from the community, there's easy ways to do that. So I'm just wondering if this is, 1.71 is something that needs to be changed.
It says normally, it's not
Okay.
a set in stone, so.
So what would, how would we go about if there is a desire to change the outline in some
You're
ways?
doing it all the time, though, in your meetings, so every chair is running their shows
For
differently.
the full commission
Yeah.
meeting?
For full commission, we've had that discussion, and remember, you all made a motion to put your public comment period at the front in your very first meeting. So you wanted a public comment opportunity at the front end, unless you, come up with a new motion to change that. I think you could propose it through a rule change, I guess. But
Motion, okay,
I
we'll
mean,
think about that.
I would highly recommend against just open dialogue. No board does. Let's take a pause in the middle of our business and talk to the community and let them be involved in our business. I think that's a practice that has caused us problems. It has caused conflict, and it is not a common practice to allow community members to participate in business items on an agenda at will. So I am strongly against.
This is what I saw in the Oakland Commission. It's done for a very short time. It's not a dialogue, it's just feedback, real-time feedback, 1 minute questions. They write it down and thank you very much, we'll answer you next time. I don't know if we're gathering enough feedback from the community. And it depends, like sometimes the items, like after it doesn't have to be like after every single committee report that there's feedback. But I think that there should be at least one more feedback period, public comment period. And that has been, I think that would do a great service to the community to answer their concerns about that.
I don't think I feel comfortable with adding for full commission meetings the public comment period at the end of every section, just because a lot of times people in their public comments, even though we can try to direct people to only respond to that question, a lot of times people come in because they have a specific thing they want to address. And I don't want us to get into a relationship where we're having to police the comments that people are making and saying, no, that's not on this specific topic, so please stop talking. I just think that would create an unhelpful dynamic. But I think that one thing that we've generally been doing in the commission meetings is that we've been doing a period at the beginning and a period at the end, because oftentimes we start at the beginning and then no one's here yet, so then we
Time permits.
right. Yeah, and so that would be the change that I would be okay
Yeah,
with making it.
but I guess the difference is that you are basically allotting the community to not participate in the meat of the business and to not engage in any way. I disagree with what I saw in Oakland was very, very, everybody just said 1 minute, everybody understood exactly what they were doing. I think we should engage with that because I would like to hear some comments to specific items. Some people may forget what they were talking about. It doesn't have to be for everything. But for example, like after Mr. Byland, Mr. Perez, I think there should have been a public comment period after that. I hope that these meetings can be adaptive, but it really does feel like to me that we are really not showing that we're 100% interested. That's a very perfunctory thing about public comment. And this is the this is the commentary I've gotten from the community. So it just seems like 2 blocks of time, but that was my concern about that. So we can continue. I don't think we should debate it here. We can just, Kayla has a comment.
Can we please get to?
Yeah, we are. I'm
It's
trying to.
7:38. I've requested this.
I'm trying to, but going to that, I knew there was going to be a big block of time, so I wanted to get everything else done. Kayla has a comment though, very quickly. Please, 30 seconds, Kayla.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree that maybe now is not a good time for responses from every single thing. I think it seems to me that like maybe as you guys get more settled, that could actually be a good idea. But I would say, like, I don't know if it's a formal rule, but I would like recommend for, I guess, my own preference, I can say, if you did like a section in the middle and a section at the end. I think that the sections at the beginning, nobody's there and like nobody's like wants to bring up something like from the last meeting and set the whole precedent of, or set the whole, you know what I mean? Like set the whole thing. So I find that at least personally when I want to give comment, like the middle is helpful because, and your meetings are also, it seems to me, going to be like a different format as time goes on. So it's not always just going to be responding to like the guests and what they say. Anyway, so but the concept of it being in the middle and then the concept of it being at the end, I think is like a decent rule to, or like rule of thumb, even if it's not like a rule, but guideline is something I would say as a person who gives public comment that I appreciate.
Thank you so much. Okay. All right. 1.72 special meetings, nothing. 1.73 executive sessions. I would propose that the actual language be included here, the statutory language, if possible. In 1.73 for executive sessions. Okay. We can still look at that. If you in your canvas of all and reading through it, if you find something else, we can please just write something and we will vote and discuss it. Emergency meetings, very quickly. Question. Mr. Jackson, yeah, come up here very quickly. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to.
I think, Chair, I just have a question about the emergency meetings 1.74. It doesn't state what the time frame is to actually get into that emergency meeting. It does state that your notice requirement is immediate, but it doesn't state how long you have to actually conduct the meeting. Prior to that, though, 1.72 special meetings does give you a time frame for 1 week. Are you using the same language in 1.74?
We will. We can add a time frame for 1.74. Jason.
To the chair, I believe this is mirroring Ohio law where you can have an emergency meeting and what the requirement is. So they do have a provision for having an emergency meeting, but the provision is for notifying the public in that. So if you want to add additional stuff, you can. But that is the wording from the Ohio Sunshine Law. Is immediately notify all public stakeholders through its media channels and use the members of the media. That is what is in the Ohio Sunshine Law Manual if you're going to have an emergency meeting to do that. So,
okay.
And we've done special meetings already. That's just pretty much a regular meeting with a little bit longer notice. So.
All right. And 1.75 work group meetings. I have a question. These meetings, are these Zoom meetings? Are we meeting work groups like in the public, but are we streaming?
Say that for committee meetings?
Work group meetings.
Oh, work group meetings? No, it could be. So this is not a meeting this is like a business meeting, right? So you don't have a quorum of anybody in these things, right? So it's like if you're going to discuss how to do something or create a project or go meet with a parliamentarian or 10 parliamentarians at once. You don't have a public standard for this work group, right? We're going to allow them, if they're here, you know, we're going to go through the same thing. We're going to let public know, we're going to invite them to attend, you know, but it is not, you're not doing formal committee business. You don't have enough commissioners to do commission business. You're having dialogues to bring back to the commission something to be considered. So that's how a work group is. It doesn't have, it doesn't meet the threshold for any of the legal requirements.
So again, is this, if we have a Zoom meeting, we just have to give the link to the public?
Yeah, you could do that, but you're not required to have the public there at a work
But it
group.
says right now, these meetings shall also be open to the public.
Yes, and
Okay.
you could do that, so we could put that out there, right? Because if we're marrying ourselves to the rule, then yes, if we already wrote that in the rule, then we will do that.
Okay.
You know,
It's not meant to, you know, hide anything from the public. I know that it's hard to get people together from those work groups. All right, now we are at, Mr. Finley, nothing? No, we are at 1.77. And we can extend the meeting by 15 minutes if we need to.
Great, thank you. So yeah, so this is after we had a discussion in our last meeting. I had brought some written text. We discussed it. I made changes based on that discussion. And then also, in addition to the text, I wrote a draft template of a letter that could be sent to, that the co-chairs could use to, the co-chairs would use to send to the mayor, according to the law, according to the rule. Co-chair Wong made a request about adding a footnote or an asterisk about adding that this would not be retroactively true. The reason I didn't put that in and thought that it would be good for us to discuss is if we're not putting that on every single rule, you know, maybe that's just something when we are changing the rules generally, we should have something that says, you know, commissioners are subject to the rules based on the rules at the time. Because I didn't think it made sense for one specific rule to say that, you know, this is not retroactive. I mean, really, none of the rules should be retroactive if there is an infraction of the rule, and they should be following the rules of that time. And so I didn't think it made sense to put it in here, but I'm in full support of doing that, having that as an asterisk at the end, or include it in the last section where it says changes to the rules.
Well, the reason I wanted the footnote is that we have an active violation of this rule. It needs to be made, that has not been, and the action required for it has not been perfected by the co-chairs. So after nearly, I think I sent an email a month ago. So yes, rules, if all fair-minded people know that rules shouldn't be grandfathered in, we've been grandfathered in with other things. But I think it needs to be made more explicit here.
What language would you like to have added?
This rule, will not be, this rules does not negate, you know, previous, but where are we going to keep the previous version of this rule, Jason? Where would it be kept? The version of this rule?
It's a public record, so it's not going away. I mean, every version of every document, it's not like we have a shredder, so.
No, but this will not be the rule that we publish publicly now. Once we change this, we're going to republish.
Right, but you have archived copies of your rules, so we don't, if it existed digitally, it's in our logs and our records, we don't destroy any records, so every version of our rule book remains a public record, infinitely in my mind.
Right, I just think that we need to keep the copy, and, you know, the reason I think I've made very clear why there needs to be footnote on this is there's an active violation of this rule, and we need to keep a record of that. This makes this rule. I think there are violations of other things, but they're not as severe as this, and there needs to be a record of this. Thank you, Ryan.
To the chair, real quick. It's memorialized in the meeting minutes that are published on the website.
Okay. But I would feel more comfortable if this was put in since we have not resolved this issue, and not to, I've tried to resolve this, and thank you for writing this template. So I just think, you know, this rule goes into effect this date, it does not negate how this rule, the version of the rule before this point does not apply, something like that. Mr. Donaldson.
Hi. I just want to request an update from the co-chairs on the violation that's being discussed.
So it is pending. It has various reasons why it's pending, but at the next leadership meeting, it will be presented and we will discuss it, and then it will be brought forth to the commission. But there was a very specific reason why it was pending. And additionally, while I have the floor, I think it is important to know that sitting as a co-chair, I think it's important to know that this last sentence, once a commissioner has met the criteria of being chronically absent, the co-chairs must send the following letter. I am more on the lines of mediation, so depending on the specific case in the instances, I'm not negating that there should be a letter sent or not sent, but I think there is a process. I do not believe and there should be interventions before. In my opinion, it should not automatically jump a letter to the mayor.
Well, there are interventions before. Were those interventions taken because there's a 60-day non-participation rule? Was that's also in the rules? Was that process engaged?
So, as I stated, there should be specific interventions that I feel are not outlined, and I have a specific thing that I will present in the leadership meeting.
Why has
I just have a question. What are we discussing right now? Are we discussing the violation or this?
he wanted
this
an
proposed
update on
rule?
the violation?
Which
So
I've
we wanted
heard.
an
Right.
update. So it was both.
So-
It was both.
She gave an update and then made a
I
suggestion.
think it'd be good to separate, figure out, like clearly say we're talking about this because it seems like we're combining
Yeah.
things right now.
So again, I think that this is kind of my feeling about this. So this is clearly we're in agreement. We're okay that going forward, your rule that you have very kindly drafted for us, can be instituted, but we still have conflict about what are we going to do for the previous rule, which to my reading is very clear and is not a process. It is the removal process outlined in 115.5 is directly sending a letter of this type to the mayor about the chronic absenteeism and gross neglect of duty. And my also concern is that the commissioner in question has also said that they do not believe that they were in violation. So a lot of things are going on. It's either or. I think it's pretty clear, the sentence. So again, my question is, are we not enforcing this rule right now? Or are we, because I really would like that footnote then, because if we're still in disagreement as to what the sentence means, then if I can receive some clarification, your desire is to have this going forward, not because Ms. Benito has written a process that says once the criteria of the chronically absent has been met, co-chairs must send the following letter. So you're in a disagreement with that.
So in my opinion, from reading it, yes, you can have a 2/3, but there's a variety of things that can transpire and occur. So in that specific instance, there were some things that was miscommunicated to where we weren't all on the same page. So I will present it to Jason and then we will follow up.
But this is, again, we're in violation of our rule. There's no commit, unless you can.
So
say-
I know the answer to that.
I understand. I'm
you're
just
fine.
asking, are we or are we not in I understand there's mitigating circumstances
Mhm.
potentially. Are we not in violation of this rule? Are we or are we not, as the co-chairs, after 1 month of deliberating on this, outside of the full commission understanding what is happening, are you going to send this letter?
It wouldn't be this letter. We're talking about.
A previous letter of this sort, but are you going to engage in the process that has been
So
outlined in
there is a note.
1.771?
And a recommendation will be made, is what I would say.
There-
But it will be discussed and then it will be brought forth, is
So-
what I'm gonna say. But this meeting isn't in regards to that. It's 7:52.
Well, I'm the
So
chair
we're
of
in
the meeting.
regards
Don't
of
worry
speaking to
about-
this and not the
Ms.
specific
Rodriguez,
issue moving
please,
forward.
point of order. I'm the chair of this
Point of
committee.
order.
Thank you. We can
So,
continue.
Can we continue with one point
We are
seven,
not,
7.1?
I am the chair
chronic
of this committee. Point of order,
absenteeism.
please. You do not get to decide if we have to continue on a little bit, but you're not seeing the essential point I'm making is that your interpretation is different from our interpretation of this rule.
I understand.
So
So
we're not
as I
following,
stated,
that makes the entire commission.
I will follow up with the leadership because it was brought forth in the leadership and then it will be brought forth.
Mr. Donaldson.
I just want to add that if we do vote for this, my vote is going to be no, because there are certain things that we are not following, period. So I don't know why this particular thing is becoming the stickler that everyone wants to like discuss and go after. I do think that there needs to be some sort of conclusion, but I'm not okay with voting for something that is going to specifically impact a violation when there have been other violations that have occurred. So why are we carrying this forward? Like, that's the point that I'm not quite, but like I said, my vote is going to be no.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, can you, let me know what those other violations were that weren't addressed or?
Not at this moment.
Up to the chair. Okay, part of this, this situation has to look at what happened prior to. The commissioner actually set her dates to us. It was the first time that that rule, could possibly have applied as far as absenteeism. We were told directly from the executive director that that rule was written for one meeting a month. Some of those months had 3 meetings a month. She did not apply for, extended leave. She did not apply for that because she was in and out of town. So she may have been out here, but back in here and out here. So that had a lot to do with this. And it does, your comment is very on target, Commissioner Donaldson, because if we aren't going to be consistent in how we apply all the rules, and if we've gotten direction that's counter to the rule, then it becomes personal almost. When we keep pushing this, it becomes personal. And for a rule that had a major change, it said that something was wrong with that rule to begin with.
No,
When you go back and
okay.
make a major change
Okay.
to an existing rule.
Rule, point
So
of order, please do not,
well, I was
please
speaking when
do
you
not
wanted to
attack
interrupt
the-
me, Chair.
No,
I'm
no,
not attacking
no.
you. I'm just
no,
saying
you're attacking
what
the work of
process
this.
is.
Please,
No,
I'm ending,
No.
please, stop.
this is why I don't like to sit at the table, Jason. There's
The-
nothing
the
I'm going to
chair-
say that doesn't get a pushback.
Hold on, let's take a breath, We have 5 minutes left here, right? So I think the original point was to discuss this rule that Commissioner Benito brought forward. And I think the question is, does a grandfather clause apply or not apply? I think you guys are right to review the rule, right? Because obviously the rule resulted in a situation where, but the rule was the rule. So you have to decide now, are you going to change the rule and retroactively apply it, or are you going to change? I think everyone's in agreement the rule needs changing because it was maybe too harsh a standard. We can't see the future. We don't know how that rule is going to play out. So now the question is, are you going to apply it retroactively or apply it
Mr.
from this
Mr.
point forward? So, but you only have 4 minutes
We
left.
can extend the
So
meeting
if
if
you
you
need
can
to
by
extend it,
15
that's your
minutes.
first order of
Would we,
business.
do I have a motion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes?
Yeah,
Okay.
I will.
Second, unanimous consent is okay? Yes, I, sorry, Mr. Johnson. Go ahead.
I'm gonna say, there are definitely problems with the rule as it exists. I don't think it's, was necessarily clear, but at the end of the day, it was the rule. So with that being said, what expectations do we have of our officers currently? Because if there's a rule that an officer doesn't particularly like, or people in the department don't particularly like, it doesn't matter if it's not, perceived to be fair. If it's you can't go back and change it. They are judged and held to that standard, and I think we should do that as well.
Ms. Benito?
So the reason why I would like for us to address this policy tonight is that we are talking about having a meeting in 2 weeks, and we are trying to create rules around leadership, around meetings. We have decorum. There's no way we are going to be able to pass all of these rules in the next meeting, unless we really do maybe we do and we're proved wrong. But so I would like for us to address this, because as it's been pointed out, this rule as it stands is confusing, and it also makes it so that within a 3-month period, someone could miss 2 meetings, and then the rule says that they would need to, it would trigger a process where they need to be called for removal to the mayor. I think that we are all in agreement that, you know, the way that we wrote it was not the best way. So my concern with, if we don't get this passed before the next meeting, and I would like for us to try to pass this tonight, because the next meeting we're going to have a lot of things that we're trying to address, is that we have a rule that we know is perhaps too strict and could lead to people unintentionally, or by, you know, they have a vacation 1 month and then the next month they get sick and all of a sudden they're out of violence, you know, they could end up being removed. We know and then we're not going to meet for 2 months after that. That's another 5 months that goes by where we could have more violations of the rule as it stands, and then be forced to address this whole conversation again. And so I would really like for us to try to pass this. Charles, I wasn't sure if what you were saying was you were not comfortable passing it because of something in the rule, or because of the grandfather question.
I was basically saying that there were things that I feel have not been presented to the entire commission, and I think Co-Chair Ridgway clarified some of those things, but I don't know when she emailed. I don't know who got it. I don't know what was said. I don't know. So that's why I'm saying, like, there are so many questions about what exactly happened. That's why I wouldn't feel comfortable with adding. There's nothing wrong with the rule itself.
I just don't think that we should be designing this rule, like, to decide what to do about this rule based on what one commissioner did in the past.
I think we're mixing a lot of things up. There's the rule that existed, and I do not think that it was so, you guys are characterizing this rule as if it was unclear. It was clear. Whether it was understood, and you know what?
I never said it was unclear, I said it was too strict.
You said that there are, whatever characterizations are made about it, it is not too strict. It's the reason why, and I worked with you with that rule, is that now we're going to monthly meetings, so it doesn't make sense to have 25%, because that would be 1.5 meetings. It doesn't make sense. However, we're mixing up two things. The rules, the clarity of the rules, which existed since March, have never been called into question until this commissioner was noted that they were in violation of the rules. This is the problem I'm having now. This is not so unclear such that this person could not have followed the rules. If there was any lack of clarity, it should be mentioned at the beginning when we were supposed to read the rules and when we passed them, and not after the fact. This is not something we're setting a precedent, as Ms. Zayed has said, that if we're going to do this for officers, I personally don't think the rule is unclear, and we're not even just disagreeing about that rule. What we're disagreeing right now with the co-chairs is they are supposed to send a letter to the mayor. Let the mayor decide. My gosh, let him interpret the rule. All I'm asking for is that we fulfill our duty, that when one of our commissioners, whether out of intention or not, violates a rule that constitutes gross neglect of duty, that we are able to show the community that we are able to enforce ourselves, hold ourselves accountable, and merely send the letter. The mayor gets the final decision on this. I'm not understanding what the resistance to sending this letter, and I've never seen any of these details. I've never seen, again, like Mr. Donaldson, I have no idea. It is the testimony of people. I've never seen any of these emails.
Right.
So
Never
because
seen
of
it,
this,
right?
Because of
I've
this,
never.
I don't think
You were
this
never
is the
sent to
time
me.
tonight to go forward.
Yeah.
If we're talking about, I mean, then I'm saying that this,
What did I say?
I would like for this
Yeah,
to be
what
the
was I
first item on our agenda.
So I said I would
For-
present it to the leadership. first,
Why-
Because that's where it was
Okay,
initially.
wait, let her talk.
Then I would present it to the rest of the commission.
Okay.
Because you haven't seen it, so when I present
She is
the
talking.
Case.
She is talking, Miss, you're out of order. Co-Chair Rodriguez, please, she's talking.
So I will respond by saying.
It has been
I
2
will
months.
present-
2
it
months.
hasn't been 2 months, because there had to be clarification on the minutes. The only
Stop.
clarification is the minutes.
Ms. Benito, please.
My concern is we talked about revising this one rule. And through that, at the last meeting, we said, you know what? Maybe we should look at all of 1.7 and revise all of 1.7. And then now that has turned into, let's review the entire first section of the handbook. And we've now divvied out the handbook to say, let's review all of this. And we're trying to do this before the next meeting, and then we're not meeting for 2 months. My frustration is that we identified a challenge with this rule. And you and I can disagree. My concern with the rule as it stands was that with moving to monthly meetings, which we did starting in June, the way that the rule stands, you can go on vacation one time, and then you can miss a meeting, and then you could be triggered for removal.
So I think.
So my concern with saying, no, this situation is too hot, so we're not going to address this, is that then we're like letting this sit forever until we're talking about our next meeting after the 21st is going to be November. And I just don't think that we've had this draft since early August, that I don't see a reason why we should not be clear, like improving the rule that we all agree with. If we're saying that we agree with the content of this rule, why are we going to wait that long? I have serious concerns about, I brought this up, it was said, let's look at the whole section, now it's let's look at all the rules, and are we really not, I mean, do we really think that the meeting on the 21st, we're going to get through that whole section with all of the new proposed language to then get this to passing? So if it doesn't pass tonight, it is what it is, but I'm deeply concerned about this.
Ms. Mino, I do want to clarify, when you brought that, I already understood the problem with this rule because I was looking at it. We worked on this rule. I don't think that we were asking, the reason did you want to have a meeting? I guess we could have at this point. It seems like we could have had a meeting just about that rule. But Mr. Johnson, do you hear her concern is that if we don't pass this rule and get it through commission, a lot of commissioners could be in violation unintentionally, right? So I hope that we're hearing each other. Commissioner Zayed.
I think there is, though, an appearance of unethical behavior if we go to change a rule in the middle of a process that's currently happening. So there's a violation that's currently happening, so we're just going to change the rule because of that. And I understand and agree with every single thing you've said, but I think the timing is just, it's just not the right timing for that. To me, we should conclude this process that's currently happening or that currently happened, and then afterwards change the rule. We have to do that. Like I said before, we hold our police officers to a standard, and we have to hold ourselves to that same standard.
Okay, can I offer a compromise? So there's no reason I can't participate in a committee meeting. So we can how about we call a meeting after we, and I am concerned that still, whether it's 1 month, 2 months or whatever, this is a long time and we need to have a time month. If you can add that, because it says must send, but it just has no time scale as to when they must send the letter. I'm happy to have a meeting while I am away in another country. I'll Zoom in, someone can chair it, and we can decide on this issue alone, and we can continue passing this rule. If that is a good compromise for you, if you're concerned that, but I agree that there are things that need to be refined. If you can, Ms. Minicho, in the meantime, let's be optimistic. Maybe we can pass this rule on the 21st. That doesn't stand to be certain that it will pass the full commission. So there will be probably more work on it. But if you can also take a look at, and I'm happy to do with you, 1.7, that whole section, we might as well do the entire section. to see if they, because they are rules, and I had wanted actually for it to be simplified, that it wasn't in multiple rules, and that we can unify all the rules and have it one rule so it's easy for people to understand, because there were violations of other kind of attendance rules. Okay, great. Are we okay about that? Great. All right, so do we know the assignments? And we'll meet on the 21st. Please have drafts. And if we, Lou has a comment.
All right, good evening, everybody. This meeting is productive to a certain degree, but it also repeats the history. The community already expect a lot out of this commission, but this commission has been repeating the same thing. Right now, people think that the rules you made are not rules. You made the rules. If somebody cannot follow it, then you change it. That's what they would think of it. That's exactly how people complain about it. So I definitely support Commissioner Zaya's point. If we want the police to follow rules properly, commissioners, you guys have to follow rules properly at the same time too. Rules sometimes have to be strict, because if you make all the rules too flexible, then that creates the same dilemma like what we are doing. At the beginning, some of the rules, we did not have any examples from the past to do. That's why some of them have had flaws. But now, after we learn the flaws, if we don't make it strict, then it doesn't show that commissioners, you all have the will, the power to set yourself as an example. You follow the rules when you make it, instead of just changing it whenever you don't feel like doing it. So please, don't worry if the rules are strict. But I think the problem is nobody wanted to be the bad guy. So nobody wanted to address the issue that they found out somebody was not following the rules, intentionally or unintentionally. This is the part which people right now are having problem with the commission. So please improve this part to show people that you are really good at what you do. You deserve to be on the seat. Otherwise, I said that back in July. More than half of you, please leave. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, I would let us, if we're to revise this rule in a fair manner and not, let's please avoid characterizations of the rule. I believe that the rule was pretty broad and pretty generous. So I think it occurred after Jason's previous experiences with attendance issues, and the community. I have to say another thing, in addition to your very good point about the police, is that the community expects us to be present and participatory. And we are, even whether we're paid or not, we have a duty to them, and we are actually taking taxpayer money on for our commission seats. So thank you. Okay, right. One more comment. 1 minute, please.
Okay, I just want to say, probably doesn't require public comment, but what you guys just did with like a lot of this meeting, you two, it is it is a big part of the problem. It's not the problem. There are a lot of problems. Not you, not you, not you, not you. Commissioner Wong and Commissioner Rodriguez. You guys and both of you, I'm sure, will feel like the other one started it. Obviously, there's a lot of back history. So, but whoever started it, like in these moments, like please, like calm yourselves down, so that you don't. It's so much. I'm just sitting here like I'm not at the table. I don't even have anything that I need to be saying, and the amount of anxiety and temperature, the height of the temperature in this room when these moments happen. I understand that a lot is at stake, and I think that it's not about the vitriol doesn't the height of the vitriol does not reflect how much a person cares. It doesn't. I think that the ability to sustain interaction and know when are the times to push on, you know, certain pressure points is the combination of those things is what is going, is I think in some way what reflects who cares the most or whatever. But it just, that's it. I mean, I just, like, I have my own opinion about this particular subject, but it's the temperature that is the problem. That is, it's counterproductive, is what I'm saying. From both of you, in my view, in this meeting. So.
I'm going to adjourn. I'm not going to comment on that. But so thank you so much. When was it? On the 21st, and then after that. So we'll see everybody on the 21st, and hopefully we'll get things passed. Thank you so much.
Is that from?